In the middle. You're in the middle. Yes. Yes. You're in the middle now. You're. Good morning. We'll start in a few seconds. Good morning. Pahingin ng water for all the speakers. Water sana. Ah, yes. Yes. Hello. Water for the panelists, yes. Water pa, then we'll start na. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome here again at Pandesal Forum here at 84-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe. Yes. We have with us distinguished speakers from abroad and from here. We are on Zoom, also Facebook Live. Please get ready with your questions. We will invite all the speakers to give opening statements, and after the opening statements, we shall open the floor for questions from our media friends. Our topics today are very relevant, very urgent, and very timely and hot. The topic here is Rage Against Proxy War, No to EDCA and Joint Military Patrols in the Sea, and Assessing the Possibility of Taiwan War and its impact on the Philippines. We have with us, I will mention first the names of the panelists, and later on I will introduce them properly before their opening statement. We have, of course, from New York, Miss Diane Sayer. She is from La Rose Organization and the Manhattan Project. Later, I will introduce her before her opening statement. And of course, beside me, the very respected nationalist former Senator Nikki Coseteng. Later, I will introduce her also, even though everybody knows her already. And coming on the way here, Princess Lady Nur Ana Indanan Sahidula of Sulu Province, Southern Philippines. Next, we have with us abroad also, but will give an opening statement, Professor Ana Malindoy. Later on, also from Singapore, all the way from Singapore, an intellectual, Dr. Henry Chan over there. And of course, Mr. Herman Laurel. I'll introduce our first panelist. Miss Diane Sayer is in New York, USA. She is a respected anti-war advocate, a peace advocate. She is unknown to not many people knows this. Aside from being an idealistic activist and leader, she is a trained classical musician and choral conductor. She is a graduate of the New England Observatory of Music, and for 33 years, she had worked closely with the idealistic economist and statesman, the late Lyndon LaRouche. Let us welcome Miss Diane Sayer of LaRouche Organization and Manhattan Project for her opening statement. Welcome, Miss Diane Sayer.
Well, thank you very much. I trust you can hear me okay. Yes, you're able to hear me?
Clearly.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. And first, let me tell you, it is an honor to be part of such a distinguished panel. I think the world right now is in a very great crisis because of the folly of some of our so-called Western leaders, not the least of which the leaders in my country, the United States. As Lyndon LaRouche warned at the time that the Berlin Wall came down, where the world missed a great opportunity for peace and development, that the collapse of the East Bloc of the Soviet system, the Soviet Union, would be small in comparison to the collapse of the transatlantic Anglo-Dutch liberal system. And that is what we are now seeing, where the city of London and Wall Street are holding over $2 quadrillion worth of derivatives obligations that can never be paid. Now, rather than admit that their policies have been a complete failure, their intention is to somehow salvage a system which goes completely against natural law by provoking a war with Russia or China or both. And I think your theme of the proxy war is exactly on the point. Lyndon LaRouche warned actually in 2011 when Gaddafi was assassinated in Libya, that this was not about Libya, that this was about preparing the way for a war with Russia. And we saw that to be the case with the arming by the West, the US and UK and others, of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the attempt to overthrow the government of Assad. And thankfully for the world, Russia stepped in and prevented that from occurring. And now the situation with Ukraine, which has nothing to do with Ukraine, but the people of Ukraine are getting ground up in a hideous proxy war, and they are not allowed by the West to stop fighting, as we saw with the attempted peace negotiations back at the end of March, early April. The then British Prime Minister Boris Johnson flew over there to prevent it. Now, what is happening to Ukraine, and also what happened to the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, which have been documented by investigative journalist Seymour Hersh to almost beyond doubt have been blown up by the United States and the UK. And I will say he doesn't mention it, but people may be aware that there was an indiscreet text message sent by the very short-term British Prime Minister Liz Truss to the American Secretary of State Tony Blinken right after Nord Stream exploded, saying it is done. So I would have to ask, and I would pose to the leaders also in the Philippines, that you might want to consider twice before thinking that you have an alliance with the current government of the United States, because it doesn't seem to create a very good situation for your nation. In Ukraine, we see it in the total extreme, where the fact that Boris Johnson and I presume the Biden administration wanted to prolong the war rather than allowing Zelensky and Putin to make an agreement to end the war back in April has led to the deaths of probably well over another 100,000 Ukrainian people who would be alive to this day had that not been sabotaged. The Nord Stream pipeline, the Europeans, the Germans in particular, can thank the US, the UK, Norway, and others, Denmark, Sweden, for the fact that their electricity and heating bills are tripling, that industries in Germany are leaving the country. And as some people have pointed out, the US benefits, they're moving here, and also we're going to be selling natural gas. This is sick. It is cruel. You see the cruelty by the fact that the United States refuses to lift the sanctions on Syria, except for a few token sanctions, but to address the horrific result of the earthquake that struck there a few days ago. So I join Helga Zeplerush in actually calling for a new paradigm. I appreciate very much this forum. I see by the name that you may be perhaps thinking in solidarity, and I hope you are, of the large demonstration which will occur in Washington, D.C. on Sunday, February 19th, on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, at which I will be speaking. And I can tell you just one side note about that, and I will conclude. The establishment of the United States is extremely alarmed that a coalition of the so-called left, the People's Party, and the so-called right, the Libertarian Party, and all kinds of people in between, has come together to oppose nuclear war. And they have been spreading all kinds of vile lies and slanders about many of us speakers, myself included, to try and break up the coalition. One speaker, Medea Benjamin, who is the leader of Code Pink, a left-leaning organization, put out publicly on Twitter, so I'm not violating anything by telling you, she said, I have supported this rally from the beginning. I support peace. I will be at the rally, but my organization would not told me that they recommended that I not appear on a panel with some of the other speakers. Now, if we cannot put aside our differences to ensure that we are alive a few weeks from now or months from now by avoiding nuclear war, then it doesn't look bright for mankind. However, I am actually optimistic. This thing has held together very well with intense opposition. We've suffered a few scars and wounds, but I hope the rally will come off as planned. I think, as you know, we know, right now in the West, we have governments that do not represent the view of the majority of the people. And I think what we're going to see in some of these countries is major changes, just as we're seeing in the world, where 2/3 of the world's population is rejecting the demands that they set themselves against China and Russia. People are rejecting that in favor of a new paradigm where every nation is respected equally, their sovereignty is respected, their security is respected, and we can work together to address the common aims of mankind, the eradication of poverty, and great breakthroughs in scientific discovery. So again, thank you very much for having me here. And I am hopeful that we are going to change the situation, but I must say at the moment it is extremely dangerous.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Miss Diane Sayer from New York, for your very eloquent, courageous, thought-provoking, and enlightening opening statement about the dangerous situation. We agree. This is now an extremely dangerous situation, and we are happy to hear about the February 19 Sunday anti-war rally in Washington, D.C. Later on, we'd like to ask questions. Please prepare your questions. Next, we'd like to invite another outstanding woman leader in another part of the world, here in Asia. Former Senator Nikki Coseteng is also former congresswoman. She started out as a street parliamentarian, became well known for her activism for human rights, for peace, women's rights. And she was an outstanding radio commentator also before, former TV host, and nationalist advocate. And she is, among her many distinguished other things that she has been doing through the years, she is also now a top educator as President and Chief Executive Officer of Diliman Educational Corporation, which operates the Diliman Preparatory School and Diliman College. She is an anti-war advocate and nationalist intellectual. Senator Nikki Coseteng, welcome for your opening statement.
Thank you, Wilson. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Chan, and my good friend, Mentong Laurel. Good morning. Good morning to our friends in media and to our viewers and listeners out there. I feel honored to have been invited to this forum. This is something I never expected to experience in my lifetime. I say this because I started my anti-US basis career, if you want to call it, in 1970 when I first entered the University of the Philippines. I was a freshman then. And of course, first quarter storm and the rest of what happened during martial law is all history. And today, it seems like we're faced again with the same things that we were fighting in the 1970s. In those days, activism was, revolved around not only national issues, but of course, before that, there was the Vietnam War. What are we witnessing today? Is this a 21st century Cold War? Is this a Pearl Harbor remake? And are we going to be the next Pearl Harbor? You know, it is sad because I recall often in the past people called us the blessed generation. We did not go through any world war. Well, if we live long enough, we just might. And that's sad because war does not have any victors. Those of us who remember the war by first-hand experience, or even just going through the history books, we know that the casualties are numerous, not just to property, but more importantly to human life. I think that the past wars that the Philippines experienced firsthand, the Spanish-American War, the Philippine-American War, and all the other wars that have been fought here and there that we participated in, must have cost us more than 1 million lives. Are we going to just forget? Why are we going to allow ourselves, again, to be the magnet for any kind of wars that are going to happen in the future? I hope we are not going to be blinded. By we, I don't mean we, the people. I mean we as in our government. I hope that our government is not going to be blinded by the $80 million that is going to be, spent here just to create 4, 5, 6, some people say 9 military bases, US bases in the Philippines. Are we going to forget the tragedy, the travesty, and the pain that was brought by Clark Air Base, the Subic Naval Base, to our country and our people? The social cost of that, in fact, we easily sweep under the rug. The Amerasian children. I remember those days when we would go to night care centers in Olongapo, in Angeles, to think that we were told this is going to bring a lot of blessings, this is going to bring a lot of stability, this is going to bring a lot of economic development, etc., etc. What was the biggest economic development in Clark and Subic in those days? One was prostitution. Prostitution was a booming business. Drugs. These were the booming businesses. It was not until the Philippines took a hold of Clark, as we see it today, and Subic, as we see it today, that these places started to have some kind of respectable, dependable, sustainable economy. My question is, what is wrong with peace? Why is there so much disgust and hatred for peace? Why is the biggest power on earth, at least they like to think so, why are they always advocating for war? And this is the sadness that I feel. All the businesses that you see around us, all these businesses were built in the last 50 or 70 years. And what is it going to end up like? Everything you saved for, everything that you worked for, supposedly for your children and your children's children, all of that's going to go melt down like ice cream or like butter in an oven, like we're here in Pandesal Bakery. No, but seriously, where is this going to bring us? You want to be the springboard, the jumping board to attack countries, other countries? A war that we really don't have anything to do with? This problem in the South China Sea, it's something that we can discuss. I don't see hundreds of thousands of people being killed because of a South China Sea issue. It's something we can discuss. It's something we can talk about. But when they talk about, being a springboard for attack, if China attacks Taiwan, etc., etc., I see them as one country. The biggest, I think there's something like a $50 billion investment of Taiwanese in China and vice versa. You think they're going to let that go down the drain? Let that go up in smokes? Between these two places, Taiwan and China, they're making billions from each other, whether buying or selling. So what is the United States doing here when they are 12,000 miles away? Obviously, it's their agenda. And please, I hope that our people will not mistake that the agenda of the United States and the Philippines is the same. The interests of the United States and the Philippines are the same. No, they're not. We want to live in peace, we want to live in development, we want to live in prosperity, and we don't want to fight other people's war. Maybe there is even no war. Maybe it's just imagined. Maybe it's just being stirred. I remember I received a text message recently, and I find it very relevant. Fire ants and black ants put in a big jar are just living each other's lives as fire ants and black ants. Somebody comes along and stirs that jar. And what happens? The fire ants and the black ants start clawing at each other and eating each other up. We saw it in Ukraine. We want to be Ukraine of Southeast Asia. So I hope that we open our eyes. The sooner, the better. Because sometimes a little bit late can be too late. And it saddens me. It really saddens me. I have children. I have grandchildren. And everything that we built, the United States does not care about it. They had no hand in it. What you see around us is not a United States effort at all. All of this progress that we see around us is here because of our own effort, and they had nothing to do with it. Seriously. So I hope we're not going to allow anybody that had nothing to do with it to come in and destroy it. So I thank Wilson for having this fora, these fora, because I hope it's not the first and last. Thank you to Mr. Chan, and thank you to Mentong Laurel for staying the course. We have to remain focused, not be distracted by onions, not be distracted by balloons, not be distracted by anything else. This has to be our main focus. And it's got nothing to do with being pro-America or pro-Chinese. This has got everything to do with being pro-Filipino. So thank you very much.
Very eloquent. Thank you, Senator Nikki Coseteng, for her thought-provoking questions and analysis. Very perceptive and truthful ideas. Let us prepare our questions also for her and for our other panelists. Thank you, Senator Coseteng. Next, we'd like to hear from Professor Ana Malindoy. She is traveling right now by plane abroad for her PhD studies. She is Vice President for External Affairs. Yes. May statement siya dito. May statement. I will read her statement. Vice President for External Affairs, Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies. I will read. She emailed her statement before her airplane flight. So I will read her statement. She is an intellectual who graduated cum laude political science from University of the Philippines and master's degree also, and now finishing her doctorate in economics. This is her statement. Professor Ana Malindoy. Sabi niya, friends and colleagues, Ms. Diane Sayer, Senator Coseteng, Dr. Henry Chan, Mr. Laurel, and media friends, good morning. My apology for not being physically present at this critical media forum with these important subtopics: rage against proxy war, no to EDCA, and joint patrols, assessing possible Taiwan war and impact on the Philippines. In any case, I am one in spirit and principle, mind and heart, opposing the militarization of the Philippines. For the wills and caprices of the United States, together with its allies in the Asia-Pacific region, the likes of Japan, in preparation for the war that the U.S. has been trying to orchestrate for the longest time now against our neighbor China. Professor Malindoy added, this war that the U.S. has been trying to instigate for the longest time at the expense of the Philippines, our country, and Asia, for that matter, is primarily anchored on four selfish fetishes of the Americans. These are, number one, preservation of USA hegemony. Number two, preservation of a unipolar world dominated by USA, but now being challenged by the rise of China and other regional powers in different parts of the world, ushering in the shift from a new unipolar world to a multipolar one. Number 3, preservation of United States supremacy and U.S. exceptionalism. Number 4, containing the rise of every aspect, may it be economically, geopolitically, militarily, and even culturally speaking. Professor Ana Malindoy said we could email this statement to everyone here. She added, take note, the American government is pretty afraid of the peaceful rise of China and the rise of Asia, or the so-called Asian century. China being at the forefront of the rise of Asia. The American government shall exert all efforts to preserve their hegemony in the world at the expense of destroying Asia. They will wage war with China to ensure that they will remain a hegemon who dictates and controls the world at the expense of other countries and people. This is the glaring truth that each one of us should not turn a blind eye to, for this might lead to destruction of our country and Asia. This is no joke. We are in the most dangerous geopolitical and economic situation since 1945. We are facing a world that is on the brink of World War III. Sabi ni Professor Malindoy also, the Ukraine crisis is a hybrid proxy war between the US and its NATO allies against Russia. Military asset of the US in its planned war against China, with the sole purpose of containing China's modernization, economic development, and rise as a contending power. Imagine our country if we are reduced by the United States to just an asset, disrespecting our sovereignty, independence as a nation state. This is a colossal insult to the Philippines and the Filipinos beyond imagination. But the critical question for most Asians and Filipinos in particular is, would we allow the Americans to succeed in their wicked plans at our expense? Would we allow a military crisis or a war to take a foothold in our relatively peaceful region, the Asia Pacific? Ana Malindoy says no. As a nation and as Filipinos, we should say no to the glaring U.S. government neocolonialism of the Philippines. We should say no to the full implementation of EDCA, the 4 EDCA military bases facing Taiwan and near the disputed South China Sea. We should say no to the enhanced joint patrol in the West Philippine Sea between the U.S. and the Philippines, which is a recipe for disaster in the South China Sea, disrupting peace and stability of Southeast Asia and the wider Asia Pacific region. Sabi ni Professor Malindoy, we should say no to deploying more U.S. troops and military assets on Philippine soil. We should say no to the proposed triad military alliance between the Philippines, Japan, and U.S. targeting China, a Cold War tactic being staged by the American government. We should say no to a president of this country who is seemingly capitulating and bowing down to pressures, wills, and caprices of Uncle Sam, for this will lead to a perilous situation for our country. The worst might come if things go wrong and a war in the Asia or Indo-Pacific region breaks out. The Philippines might end up collateral damage, and the war will devastate us beyond our imagination. Hence, we should not allow ourselves and the Philippines to be used as a pawn or proxy of the U.S. in its rivalry with China. We should learn from the mishaps of the Ukrainians and their U.S. puppet President Zelensky. Again, the Ukraine crisis is a hybrid proxy war between Russia and the US alongside its NATO allies, and Ukraine is the pawn. Do we want our country, the Philippines, to end up like Ukraine? I really hope not. Professor Ana Malindoy continues, look at what is happening right now. The Ukraine crisis is bleeding the entire world. Do we want a repeat of the Ukraine crisis in Asia? Do we want to be the next Ukraine in Asia? Professor Ana Malindoy said, I hope not. Again, real talk dictates that as a country, the Philippines needs to be on the side of peace and must exert all efforts not to be dragged into any military conflict detrimental to the existence and survival of the Philippines. In doing so, we appeal to the end of EDCA, BFA, and the abrogation of the Military Mutual Defense Treaty, MDT. This will liberate us, the Philippines, from the indirect control and subservience or the state of being submissive to the US, especially in military aspects. Whoever doesn't understand this is a lost cause. Filipinos and Asians alike must be mindful of the fact that peace is an essential precondition to economic progress and development. Without peace, economic progress is not possible. This, I just read the statement of Professor Ana Malindoy, and she requested us to email this to all the media and the public. Thank you very much, Professor Ana Malindoy, for your statement. Sorry, last paragraph. I forgot. There's a last paragraph. Her statement. The Ukraine crisis is a living testament that wars and conflicts can easily wipe out all sorts of economic development and progress. That is what Senator Coseteng just said. That is also what Ms. Diane Sayer said. By Ukraine and Russia, by all countries across the globe, it will erase all progress. In war, there are no winners, only losers. Our senator said that also earlier. Professor Ana Malindoy, last paragraph said, in retrospect, the complications of geopolitics are indeed costly. The Philippines and the global South cannot afford war. But the path toward development, economic development, benefits countries and their people. The path to peace creates security, stability, and we can achieve economic prosperity only through peace and stability. Ladies and gentlemen, media friends, and the public, thank you very much. A pleasant morning to all. From Ana Malindoy. Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome from Singapore, flying all the way here. Based in Singapore, Dr. Henry Chan. He is a respected geopolitics, technology, and economics analyst. Also a columnist for Manila Times occasionally. Dr. Henry Chan is a visiting senior fellow at the Cambodia Institute for Cooperation, Peace, and Peace. Also adjunct research fellow at Integrated Development Studies Institute here in Manila. He has a very distinguished educational background. I will summarize only because it is very long and impressive. He graduated electrical engineering degree from University of the Philippines, Diliman, here in Quezon City. Also graduated masters in biopharmaceutical at University of New South Wales. I think this is in Australia. Yes. And he also earned his doctorate degree at Singapore Management University, one of the best schools in Asia. His research interests include China's socio-economic development and political progress, technology and growth, ASEAN region studies in digital transformation, climate change, the new global order, etc. Let us welcome Dr. Henry Chan for his opening statement about our topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wilson, for your very generous introductions. I'm also very privileged to sit with my fellow alumni from the University of the Philippines, Senator Coseteng, Mentong, Anna Marie. Now, I want to share with the audience the perspective what I see in Singapore about the EDCA. Number one, we have to remember that the general background in the world is that since the 1940s, since the 1400s great navigations, the Europeans slowly dominate the world. Particularly in the last 200 years, in the 19th and 20th century, there is almost complete dominance of Europe in Southeast Asia. So there is a lot of either nostalgia or there's a lot of criticism of this European dominance. But now we are living in a transition period that can be very dangerous, but it can also provide us an opportunity for change. Now, I want to paraphrase President Biden. He said, this is going to be a decisive decade. And somehow, President Xi also talked about an unparalleled complexity in the world today. And Senator Coseteng and Anna has already talked about the world is transitioning to multilateralism. Now, in human history, there is any such a global transitions, I don't think anyone can escape from it. And how to navigate this transition can be a very challenging path for any national leaders. Now, what are these transitions about? I'm sure everybody say that. Right now, the China-US rivalry is talking about what? Big power rivalry? The US, China trying to fight each other out? Is there a East-West confrontation? Is there an ideological collision of democracy versus autocracy, first world versus third world, liberalism versus collectivism? Or is about the unfair trade? Now, I will tell you, everybody has its own piece of cakes, and they might be both right in some aspect. But in general, there is no doubt that the rise of Asia, typified by the rise of China in particular, has really changed the world. Now, how do ASEAN and international observers look at EDCA? First, I will say that we are not surprised because everybody knows that in international survey, Filipino consistently rank the number one admirer of the United States, even higher than Mexico, even higher than the US domestic audience. So number two, it's very sad to note that Philippine diplomatic history has a tendency to swing because of our domestic presidential system. So you can see that from GMA to President Noy, from President Noy to President Duterte, and from President Duterte to President Marcos Jr., you will see the swing is almost 180 degrees. So is there any international surprise on the Philippine move? I will say no. Even China is not taking this swing as a complete surprise. In my last attendance of Wilson's conference, I already remind you that President Xi, in breaking the customary protocol, he did not accept President Marcos' invitation to visit the Philippines. And there is already a subtle sign that there is a certain degree of discomfort, even when President Marcos went to Beijing and signed the 14 agreements. Now, what the ASEAN are concerning is really that will this move destabilize Southeast Asia? Because we all know that aside from being an economic power, China in the last 10 years has transcended itself into a technological and military power. Now, we already know that China now today has more service naval vessels than the United States. And they probably even have the best destroyers, according to the US military website. So you will know that nobody wants war, but when you challenge them, I don't think any great powers will take a challenge lightly. They will respond. Now, we are not worried about nuclear war. Why? Because in the EDCA, it is very explicitly stated that the US will not store nuclear weapons in the Philippines. But even a conventional war, if we look at Ukraine, the suffering can be a lot. And as Senator Coseteng rightfully pointed out, this is not an easy time. So for ASEAN, we are very concerned about will it escalate? We are not worried about EDCA because I'm sure President Marcos is rational on EDCA. But we are very worried about what the escalation will mean. So if you look at the Indonesian chairmanship of ASEAN this year, last week, they already emphasized that they hope to conclude the code of conduct in South China Sea, even though that has been standing for 20 years and the likelihood of it being concluded easily is not probably there. But they still talk about it as the number one agenda that they want to pursue in this part of the world. Now, number two is every countries, when they conduct foreign policies, it is not just an affair for during the term of a president of 6 years. That is, you have to look into 5-year, 10-year, 20-year horizon. Because a president can come and go after an election cycles, but the country has to move. So in geopolitics, we have a very famous phrase, geography is destiny. And whether we like it or not, having a good relationship with China is in the long-term permanent interest of the Philippines. You cannot change your neighbor. Okay, that is a very pragmatic dogma in international relations. So I hope that today I welcome questions and I hope I can contribute modestly to any discussion on these issues. Again, EDCA is a done deal. Southeast Asia and other countries are not very concerned too much about it. I don't think even China is concerning too much about it either, as President Xi's not accepting customary invitations in a reciprocal visit. But we do very worry over escalations. So thank you very much.
Very thought-provoking ideas and questions from Dr. Henry Chan. Thank you very much. He said we should worry about escalation. Later on, let us ask questions for him and others. Last but not the least, to give an opening statement is co-organizer of this Pandesal Forum, Mr. Herman Laurel. He is president of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute and nationalist public intellectual, an anti-war and peace advocate, also for a broadcast journalist, also a columnist, and geopolitics and politics analyst. Welcome, Mr. Herman Laurel, for your opening statement.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Good morning to everybody, and of course to Madam Diane Sayer of the LaRouche movement in the United States of America. We will be listening to her at the February 19 Rage Against War rally. We expect it to be of tens, if not hundreds of thousands, gathering at the Lincoln Memorial. Thank you also to Madam Nikki Coseteng, who came out of her quiet life to join us in protest of these things that are going on, initiated by the United States of America, endangering the Philippines. I'd like also to mention Princess Lady Anne Sahidullah, who has not communicated why she is not here, but she was very excited to join us yesterday. I don't know if there is any disruption of arrangement, but I'd like to say that while the Citizens National Guard, which she represents per Colonel or per retired Major Harry Gonzalez, I will explain this about their organization. The Citizens National Guard is a civilian military, retired military organization that have taken certain positions on Philippine affairs. And today they were supposed to deliver this message, Princess Tausog, Princess Lady Anne Sahidullah, which has only 3 paragraphs, but essentially says, number 1, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement is a mere executive agreement. It is not a treaty. As this echoes the late Miriam Defensor Santiago, Senator Defense Santiago's position that this is illegal and unconstitutional. And secondly, the second point here is Filipinos are made to think that America will protect them and keep them safe, when the reality is that the EDCA is designed to benefit America's military more by giving them access to new bases after they departed from the Philippines in 1992. And third point is, it is clear that America is out to establish their unipolar rules-based world order, where their resultant hegemony will be a continuing American empire, and they will continue to expand the presence of their military and naval forces in the entire world. On my end, I would just like to announce that my article from the Asian Century Journal is submitted to everyone here and on the internet, entitled "The War versus War, a War versus U.S. Wars." We are in a war against all wars. We want to end all wars. Gusto nating itigil ang gera sa mundo natin. We have had 500 years of continuous war under the Western hegemony of the past 500 years, and particularly the 100 years of American hegemony at the turn of the last century, the 19th to the 20th century. This must end. We must now have 500 years of forever peace. It is possible. Pwede pong magkaroon ng 500 taong kapayapaan sa mundo po natin. Imagine all the trillions of dollars going into the war industry today. If that is converted to purely peaceful, technological, scientific advancement, what the life of humanity will be. So instead of going through the article, I will just ask you to go through it. But there is an important point in the article where I cited the RAND Corporation War Games and the reaction of the Lowy Institute of Australia. The RAND Corporation in 2016 published an article based on their wargaming of US-China war and concluded that the US will not win, China will lose, will suffer heavily, but China will go on, and its economy will quickly revive, which is echoed by the Lowy Institute. Of course, we can understand that the RAND Corporation, which is a top military think tank of the United States military, will have a certain bias for the United States. The conclusion is, of course, understandable. But the truth is, in all of the wargaming of various think tanks of the United States, the US does not win a war in Asia against China. And of course, historically, the US lost 2 wars in Asia when directly or indirectly confronting China. The first is the Korean War, which the Americans lost and had to sue for an armistice. The second is the Vietnam War behind Vietnam, which was backed by China. So the US cannot win the war in Asia, cannot win the war even using the Philippines, but will use the Filipinos as cannon fodder for their interests, as echoed by all our speakers today. So there are 3 immediate questions I'd like to address. I'm sure this will come up in the questions later on. Number 1, the laser light incident at the Ayungin Shoals. Please remember that the Ayungin issue has been around for 22 to 24 years. In 1999, this was a dispute again between China and the Philippines, which both claim the area, but China had control of the sea area there, and there were negotiations between the Estrada government and the Chinese government, where it is claimed, and there are evidences to this effect, but are presently classified information, but I suppose will eventually come out, that President Estrada did accede to the negotiations from China that resupply of the Ayungin claim of the Sierra Madre, BRP Sierra Madre, anchored at the Ayungin Shoals, be allowed and only for supplies of rice, food, and sustenance, but not for anything that could rebuild or build or establish an installation there by the Philippines. So this has been going on, and except for maybe 3 or 4 major sensationalized incidents for 20 to 24 years, there has been no incident. How come? Because there is a working arrangement between the Philippines and China. There is a modus vivendi on this. But this is changing right now with the apparent turnaround of President BBM from Duterte's policy of entente or engagement with China. Number 2, the laser light, military grade laser lights are very common. Even civilians have them. But the military laser lights are just enhanced laser lights. The use of military grade laser lights does not mean anything offensive automatically. Because in the Vietnam War, for example, when stranded the soldiers of the Americans are waiting for helicopter rescue, they use military laser lights to signal their location or their positions. When you are signaling at night another ship at sea, you use laser lights to give a warning that you are probably facing some danger of collision or anything like that. So this is an ordinary case of laser light being used with regards to the reported supply run of the Philippines to the Ayungin Shoal garrison, marine garrison, in this particular occasion. So, number 3, however, I have checked with the Chinese embassy and they said everything is being discussed right now because the arrangement of President Xi Jinping with President BBM in the last state visit of BBM to China is now in operation. In other words, there was an agreement during the visit from January 3 to 5. There was an arrangement agreed upon in China that a hotline between the Philippines and China will be established in case of controversies like we have seen in this so-called laser incident. So there is no big issue here. Number 3, yeah, well, that's number 3. The hotline is working, but still on the Ayungin Shoal. Well, of course, my final point is the Philippines is anchoring its claims in the Ayungin Shoals on the rusted, decaying BRP Sierra Madre. And of course, the belief of the China side is that the Philippine supply runs are already negotiated and established. However, in several occasions, and that is what creates the controversy, allegedly, cement, steel bars, and such materials were surreptitiously being smuggled in, which would violate the understanding or negotiated conditions that materials to build any established facilities and so on would not be part of the resupply missions. So I think that clarifies a lot of things. And so I refer the other questions to the article that I submitted and the paper from, position paper from Princess Lady Nur Ana Indanan for your reference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman Laurel, for your analysis, your perceptive and thought-provoking questions also. Thank you very much. Now we're opening the floor for media questions and also for those watching via Zoom and Facebook Live. The first question, we'd like to give a microphone to our media friends. Please state your name and your organization for the benefit of our panelists. Welcome.
Vic Sumintak of Net 25.
Net 25. Yes.
I'm happy to see former Senator Nikki Coseteng na kinover ko yan noong nasa old Senate building pa kami na ngayon ay National Museum with Senator the late Senator Plavier, Ernesto Maceda and others.
Wow.
I'm happy to see you, ma'am. Ma'am, since time immemorial, as you stated, alam mo naman natin na yung interest ng Amerika nandito. Talagang even the time during the time of President McKinley bago tayo sakupin, if I remember right, the statement of the former US State of Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan said that the history of the United States will be written in the Pacific for the next 1,000 years. And now nangyayari na. So my question is, yung kinatatakutan natin, if we assess the foreign policy of President Bongbong Marcos na parang makiling masyado siya sa US.
Unang-una, salamat sa inyong tanong. Unang-una, gusto nga namin malaman ano ba talaga yung foreign policy natin. Kasi hindi ko alam kung ano yung foreign policy. Yan ba ay nakasulat? Yan ba ay sinusundan? Ang ating bang kilos bilang isang bansa ay alinsunod dun sa ating foreign policy. Pag sinabi mong foreign policy, hindi yan pwedeng parang sala sa lamig, sala sa init. Hindi pwede kung saan ang agos ng alon, dun lang tayo. Kung saan nandun ang pera, pag sinabi sa atin, $80 million ang ipapasok namin dyan. Sige, pasok na kayo. Diba? Kaya bilib ako dito kay Governor of Cagayan.
Mamba.
Governor of Cagayan, Mamba. Sabi niya, ayaw namin ng gulo dito. Nananahimik kami dito. Diba? For the last 1,000 years, wag sabihin na natin, ilan ba napatay dito ng inchik? Ilan ba? Meron bang binaril? Meron bang massacre? Meron ba? Ano ba nangyari dito? Kung bibilangin natin, di ba? Kaya yung foreign policy natin, kung hindi maliwanag, dyan, abutin tayo ng indulto dyan. Abutin tayo ng kamalasan. Ngayon, tanong nyo, bakit kumikiling si Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. sa Amerika? Baka siguro dapat ako na magtanong. Ito ba ay may kaugnayan dun sa mga kaso na hidden wealth na nasa Amerika? Hindi ko alam kung ano na nangyayari doon sa kasong yun eh. Sa Amerika daw, justice is dispensed very swiftly. Sa Amerika daw, talagang pag sinabing katarungan, they're supposed to be, the defenders of the free world, for justice, for human rights. Ngayon, ano nangyari dun sa kaso ng Marcos? Di ba? Ito bang pagpayag ng ating pamahalaan na magtayo ng base militar dito sa atin? Of course, there's EDCA. Nandiyan ang VFA, kung ano-ano pa, sabihin natin. Pero Senado na ang nagsabi, 1991, na umalis na kayo. Tama na, terminated na. Wala nang extension. Diba? 12 senador ang nagsabi niyan. So ngayon, 1991, ngayon 2023, nagbabago na naman ang hangin, di ba? Ano ba ang kaugnayan nito dun sa hidden wealth kaso sa Amerika? Di ba? So, hindi natin masagot 'yan. Maganda yung inyong mga tanong, hindi natin masagot. Bakit? Kasi yung foreign policy, kung hindi nyo pa alam na kayo ay nasa media, ano pa kaya yung naglalakad dyan sa Cubao? Saan siya? Sinong papakinggan niya? Ano ang batayan? Ano ang poste na ating sinasandalan kung yung foreign policy natin na kayo mismo sa media ay hindi nyo alam?
Ma'am, siguro I suggest gumawa kayo ng part 2 ng Sakuko ng Agila.
Yeah.
Alam nyo,
For those foreigners watching, that's a movie made by former Senator Nikki Coseteng and then former Senator Joseph Estrada, an anti-US military bases movie.
I think that was in I wasn't a senator then. I was in Congress, no? Maybe 1991 ba yun? Basta before, kasi 1992 ako naging senador eh.
So ginawa niyo
1991, no? Pero teka muna, hindi tayo pwedeng gumawa ng sine katulad ng Sakuko ng Agila ngayon 2023. Bakit? Unang-una, kung tanungin natin si Mr. Ricky Lee na sumulat ng script, siguro 70% of that script was demolished, was erased. Yung nakikita ninyo na sine sa Kuko ng Agila, Hindi po yun ang ini-shooting namin ni Erap.
Bakit ho na erase?
Napakarami na inakat. Dati ang chairman ng MTF,
MTRCB.
MTRCB, ang dating chairman si Manuling Morato. Talagang cut lahat, ang dami. Kaya,
Dati.
Ma'am, huwag kayong magagalit lang ha. Hindi bali basta hindi natanggal yung kissing scene nyo ni Erap.
at una-una, no? Pangalawa, kailangan yung reality ngayon, yun ang dapat natin ipakita sa tao. Just an aside, before that movie was made, 70% of our people did not realize that these the American bases, Clark, Subic, and that time John Hay was still there, no? And QB Point, I think there was still QB at that time in La Union.
Wow.
People did not realize the impact of the bases until that movie came out.
Yes.
So now, with Netflix, with the movie you can watch in the cell phone, wala nang bayad, hindi ba?
Mm.
I think it's now up to Wilson Flores and his magnetic influence on those that can afford to redo a movie with new actors, new participants, new insights, etc. para malaman ng taong bayan. Kasi bihira lang ang nakikinig, bihira lang nagbabasa, di ba?
Magandang idea ninyo, ha? And
That
Yes,
I give
yes.
you the credit for that
Yes.
idea.
great
Yes, yes,
idea. Ay, padagdag si
Ah.
Dr. Henry Chan wants to add. Yes, may sagot si Dr. Henry Chan.
I am
Ah.
not watching this.
Sa kuko ng agila.
Movie sa kuko ng Agila, in the claws of the eagle.
In
Yeah.
the claws of the eagle.
In the claws of the eagle.
That was a famous movie.
And I'll tell you, the soundtrack of that movie is awesome, is legendary. That was by Freddie Aguilar. Sa
The
kuko ng
famous
Agila.
singer.
Yes.
Wow.
I remember that
Tatlong
time.
beses kong pinanood yan.
I remember that time
Wow.
inside the theater,
Yes.
and
Music was
the
in
music
it.
was played.
Sorry, pare.
Someone would actually cry.
Wow.
Naiiyak yung tao doon sa
Oo.
kanta ni Freddie Aguilar.
By the way, the writer became national artist last year.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Ricky?
Yes,
Well,
national artist, and he spoke here
Maybe we should ask
last
him.
December. Yes.
Actually,
Where is the script? Buhayin natin yung script niya
Yes.
to add more substantial material.
Pwedeng part 2.
Part
Parang
two nga.
Godfather 1,
Yes.
Godfather 2, parang Star Wars 1, Star Wars 2. That's a great idea by you and Senator Coseteng.
actually,
Yeah.
when we conversed over the phone,
Yes.
we discussed the idea of having that movie.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So we'll see what we can do.
Yes. Just to summarize what Senator Coseteng just said lang for the foreign media, she said we don't have a stable foreign policy, wishy-washy, she said.
Oo.
Yes, with the controversies.
Probably
Next
one
question.
last point, kasi alam ko marami pang magtatanong. Kami tong, ito kasi, last session natin dito, napag-usapan natin yung timetable ng US kasi meron talaga silang plano.
Yes, perahin ng
It's
China.
between 2025 to 2027. Ito bang nangyayari ngayon? Ito na siya talaga.
Magandang tanong.
If I may add to that,
Yes,
it's in my article.
Yeah.
Ako ay nag-interview ulit kay retired General Victor Corpus last week. And inulit niya na yung kanyang sinulat na libro, DMAC Points, I forget the full name, but it's there in the book. It is a book that is being used by West Point also, American West Point, in the study of the South China Sea issues. And sabi niya, as far back as the 1990s, pinag-uusapan na 2025 ang target. 2025 ang target ng Estados Unidos na maglungsad ng gera dito laban sa China. Hindi yung todo nuclear war, kundi limited war kung magagawa nila para lang mapinsala ang ekonomiya ng China at maibagsak ng 35% ang GDP ng China. So that is the target for 2025, but that could extend to 2027. Yun ang sabi ni General Victor Corpus, and that generally seems to be the timetable na lumalabas po ngayon.
Thank you. May pahabol pa si Senator, then we have questions. Yes.
Actually, kung kapayapaan ang pinag-uusapan at itong gusto nilang mangyari na tayo gawing springboard ng kanilang pag-aatake kung saan man nila gustong sumali sa anumang gera na parang sinestage na nila, no? Kailan ba matatanggap ng Estados Unidos na ang Asia ang siyang nagpumapalit na dun sa kanila, sa kanluran? When can the West accept that the East has risen? In the last 40 years, while America has been pouring all their money into wars, killing, bombing, and all this, destroying countries, Asia has quietly been building and innovating and working very hard, you know. And you can see the trend. You go to China today, it's different from China 20 years ago. In the same way that you go to the US today, it is different from the US of 20, 30 years ago. Now you see so many people homeless, so many people living in their cars, so many people in the food lines even, you know. That is not our image of America. And when you see China today, all you need to do is go to the internet. Their trains, their bridges, the infrastructure, you know, the agriculture development, the technological development. You can see that's a far cry from what it is like in the United States. So the realities are different, and yet the United States keeps painting the same picture. China is poor, China is hungry, China is this and that, and it's communist, it's this and that. You know, I'll tell you, I think there are more Louis Vuittons and Gucci handbags per capita in China than in the United States or anywhere in Europe. I mean, this is just to exaggerate it a little bit, no? But I'll tell you, when I first went to China in 1989, after I won as a congresswoman, and I am of Chinese descent, I went back to my hometown. What did I bring with me? I brought soap, cooking oil. I brought Vienna sausage. I bought disinfectants. I brought shampoo to China. Today, the kids of those to whom I brought these products from the Philippines, oh, and Milo too, chocolate drink. And the kids of those people pick me up in the airport in Range Rover and Porsche Cayenne. Serious. I am not inventing this. All of you that had experiences going to China in 1989 and going to China pre-pandemic will see what used to be a trail going back to my home village is now an 8-lane highway. What used to take me 4 hours, 5 hours to go from Xiamen to Fuzhou can now be taken in a train for an hour, 15 minutes. Now, I remember I was in school in the United States in 1967. I was in the Bay Area. My mother went to Stanford University for her master's degree. We would travel from San Francisco to Los Angeles by car. We still do the same thing today. Maybe a little faster because in those days it was just US 101. Then they built Highway 5, traversing almost the same distance. Now, if from 67 to today, we still do not have 300 kilometers per hour trains going from San Francisco to Los Angeles today, and that's a main artery. You can just imagine, what was China in 1967? There was no television.
Sleeping giant.
And where is it today? So this is what I mean. The US and the West will have to accept this. The sooner they accept this, the closer we are to peace. Because what's wrong with having 100 other countries that are progressive? What's wrong with having 2, 3, 4, 5 in the top 5 countries that are progressive? What's wrong with that? Now, why can't the US accept that? Is it because they just want to keep selling arms and making the trillions of dollars? Selling arms? I mean, they cannot even tax their top billionaires. Another 1%, 2% in taxes to feed the world. And yet, they have trillions of dollars, not for their homeless and not for their hungry, but for arms, for sending to Ukraine, you know? So I hope that America will not consider us enemies. No, my best friends are Americans.
Thank
It
you.
is the American policy and these policies that are creating so much destruction and so much suffering in the world that we are against.
Thank you, Senator.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Senator Coseteng. We have other questions.
Yeah, well, I received a
Amazing
question from our
perceptions.
live stream
Yes.
asking what evidence do I have about the negotiations over the Ayungin Shoal. Actually, I tried to verify with our sources here in the Philippines. They all refer to the reports from 1999 to the present of two of our presidents who reportedly agreed to the negotiations with China on the Ayungin Shoal. President Estrada promised, for example, according to these reports, which President Estrada has not denied over the past 25 years. I have not come across reports, and I have asked others if they have come across reports. If this has been denied by Estrada, there is none.
Thank you.
Estrada promised to remove the VRP Sierra Madre in time. At that time, the reason Estrada gave to the Chinese counterpart is that the Philippines does not have the funds to pull the derelict ship VRP Sierra Madre from Ayungin Shoal. The second source is, of course, President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, who had good relationship with China. And this is quoted again as a source that she also agreed that the Ayungin Shoal should be resolved through negotiations, and the resupply missions were allowed under these conditions. So
Thank you.
I checked with the Chinese embassy. They say they have evidence, but it is classified information today. I don't know what it would take. Could the Philippine government make petitions to bring this out? Because it's classified information according to the Chinese government. Well, I think the evidence there is 22 to 24 years kasi hindi ko ma-eksakto kung kailan nagsimula ang negotiations.
Thank
But
you.
certainly 1999, nagkaroon na ng usapan dyan. And ilang beses lang ang naalala nating insidente sa loob ng 2 dekada.
Thank you.
3, 4 na insidente.
Thank you.
Kaya kung talagang malaking issue yan, edi matagal nang naging sumabog na yan. No?
Thank you.
Ito ay binubuhay lang. This is only revived when they need propaganda against China.
Thank you very much. May tanong tayo dito, very important, at the back. Try to have short answers because we have many questions. Yes.
Yeah.
Pakilala.
Senator, magandang
Yes.
umaga po. Michael Rogas po from Radyo Pilipinas. Ma'am, are you satisfied with the ongoing piling of diplomatic protests against China na ginagawa po ngayon ng Pilipinas because of that incident nito mga nakakaraan sa West Philippine Sea? Is that correct? Yan po ba yung dapat natin gawin? Filing of diplomatic protests against China?
Actually, kaya nga sabi ko kanina, malabo yung hindi natin alam kung ano yung foreign policy natin eh. Kasi lahat ng kilos, thank you, lahat ng kilos ng ating pamahalaan ay dapat alinsunod dun sa ating patakaran. Diba? At yung patakaran na yan ay para sa malawakang kabutihan ng ating bansa. Yung interest natin ang dapat natin pangalagaan. Ngayon, magfa-file ka ng diplomatic protest. Diba? Ano ngayon ang napala natin sa pagpunta ng presidente ng Pilipinas sa China? Diba? Ano ba pinag-usapan nila? Kasi kung nakikita ko yung mga nandito sa cellphone, yung mga lumalabas lang sa internet, yung AEIOU, ano yung pinag-usapan ninyo? Di ba? Kung baka hindi natin malaman kung ano ba yung mga pangungusap, yung ba mga paragraph na pinag-usapan, may nakasulat ba? Ano ba yung pinag-uusapan nila? Di ba? Kasi kung ang pag-uusapan lang, pumunta kayo dito, mga taga mainland China, pumunta kayo dito para kayo ay magnegosyo dito. Di mo na kailangan punta ng China. Ang China, ang mga negosyante galing sa China, mabilis pa sa 4:00 pag nakikita nila na dyan may lugar, pwede tayong kumita, pwede tayong mag-trade. 3,000 taon na nila ginagawa yan eh. Hindi na natin sila kailangan puntahan. Kasi kung yun lang ang dahilan na pupunta ka ron, unang-una sayang pera. Number 2, lahat yung mga tao dito sa Pilipinas, Filipino-Chinese na businessman, yung mga taga-federation, hindi nila kailangan Isang tawag lang sa telepono, punta ka rito, magdala ka dito ng $100 milyon, papasok dito yan. Kung nakikita nila na maayos kayong kausap at sanay na sila. Yung Henry Limbunlyong, presidente ng Federation, at yung iba pa mga opisyal niya, sino bang kausap nila na negosyante? Puro taga-China. Hindi mo na sila kailangan ituro doon. Ngayon, iniimbita mo sila dito. Pagkatapos gaganyanin mo sila. Hindi naman tanga yung mga yun di ba? Hindi sila tanga. Kaya parang kumbaga, kung ikaw ay magrereklamo, merong naayon na paraan. You know, it's very easy to deal with the Chinese. Why? They have mahabang pisi na pasensya. Ha? Tingnan mo yung Hong Kong. O sige, talo na kami. Tinambakan nyo na kami ng opium. Teka muna, come to think of it, sino ba yung opium queen at that time? Yung nanay ni Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Yun ang nagtitinda ng opium sa China O, di ba? Hindi naman ako nag-invento nun O, ngayon, nasa history books yan. Okay. Talo na kami. O, anong gusto nyo? O yan, maliit na barangay. O, bigay na natin yan. Maliit na isla dyan. Sige, bigay mo na yung Hong Kong. After 97 years, balik nyo yan sa amin Okay. Nabalik ang ganong kalaking teritoryo, ganong kaunlad na teritoryo, isang bala, hindi sila pumutok. Sayang pera, magpaputok ka ng isang bala, magkano yan? Hindi, wala yan. So kung pag-uusap lang at kailan tayo, hanggang kailan tayo mag-uusap, mag-uusap tayo na mag-uusap, walang namamatay sa usap. Pero pagka mobilization, mag-iimbak kayo dito ng armas, gagawa kayo ng bodega, dahil pagka may disaster, pwede kayong kumuha dyan ng mga goods, na relief goods, katarantaduhan yan. Ginagago lang tayo. Ibig mo sabihin, gagawa ka ng ganong kalaking bodega para lagyan mo ng dilata tsaka Lucky Me? Labo nun. Di ba? Hindi naman tayo ganong katanga.
So, ang duda ho ninyo, ito pong pakikipag-alyansa natin ngayon or ng gobyerno ngayon at pagpayag sa EDCA, mayroon pong kapalit at ang inyo pong nasa sa isip ay yung pong usapin ng hidden wealth ng pamilya.
Hindi mo maaaring ilayo yan dalawang usapin na yan. Bakit? Dahil kung tutuusin, tayo ang pwedeng magdikta kung hanggang gaano kalalim yung pwede nilang pasukin at ilabas mula dito sa ating bansa. Tayo magdidikta niyan. Sabi niyo, pwede ito, hindi pwede ito. Yung lupa atin Di ba? Ngayon, hingi sila ng hingi. Ano ngayon ang kapalit nun? Di ba? Kasi yung mga dagat natin nandyan. Ngayon, sabihin natin, gusto nila maglagay ng base militar or dito sa Mindanao, sa Palawan. Yung Palawan natin, turista yan ang gusto natin akitin dyan gagawin mo yung base na nandyan yung mga balikatan or yung mga joint exercises. Nagsa-sunbathing yung mga tourist noon, biglang may joint exercises. Sira ba? May diferensya tayo, di ba? Ang laking diferensya, di ba? Doon sa Cagayan. Sa Cagayan, ang ganda-ganda doon. Meron kang port, meron Cagayan export zone, may kung ano-ano, ang dami. You're at the eastern seaboard of the Philippines, di ba? Ang gaganda dyan, may mga gubat, may mga nagte-trekking, bigla mong kakalbuin yun para, para saan? Para sa barya na ibibigay sa atin? Yung barya na yan, pwede natin kitain yan. Magkano? Sabihin na natin, magkano ibibigay nila? 82 million. Magkano yung kinikita ng OFW? Nagtsatsaga, magtrabaho sa ibang bansa para magbalik dito, $32 billion. Ano ba yung barya na $82 million? $82 million lang? Ha? Baka ito si Wilson Flores, mas marami pa kaysa sa pinagpapalit natin, barya? Pandesal? Ito, pandesal. Di ba? Ibig sabihin, paano tayo nagkaroon ng ganyang isip? Paano tayo nagkaroon ng ganyang utak? Ngayon, Nueva Ecija, mapayapang lugar, rice granary. Tatambakan mo ngayon ng ganyan, gagawin mo parang Olongapo dati. Tingnan mo yung kaunlaran ng Olongapo at Angeles ngayon compared to panahon na nandyan ng base militar. Isa pa, hindi pa natin napag-uusapan. Kung sila gumawa ng mga criminal activities dito at sila ay mag-rape o sila ay bumatay ng tao dito, sambang korte ang ririnig nitong mga kaso na ito. Ha? Dati siniship out lang nila eh. Ship out mo lang yung sundalo, okay na eh. Ang dami ng kaso ganyan, hindi ba? Ang dami niyan, ako, ang daming social cost. Sino magbabayad tayo? Anong ginawa nila sa American children? Hinahanap pa yung mga tatay ng mga bata na yan. Yung mga bata na yan, iba 30 anyos na, 40, 50 anyos na ngayon eh. Anong ginawa nila para sa American children? Pag pumupunta sa Amerika, sila pa nagiging hadlang para hanapin yung mga tatay na yon dahil sila ay dapat sumuporta doon sa mga anak na iniwan nila.
Okay. Ma'am.
So I mean to say, there are many things that people don't want to talk about. Well, let's talk about it in the open now.
Last
Thank
question
you.
po. Last
Yes.
question po. What will be the effect yung pong pinasomon kahapon ng Malacanang ang ambassador ng China para pag-usapan po yung pong nangyari sa West Philippine Sea na pag-laser doon po sa ating barko ng Philippine Coast Guard? What will be the effect of this, ma'am? Doon po sa mga kasalukuyang kasunduan at relasyon ngayon ng Pilipinas at ng China. Ano yung nakikita po ninyong epekto yung pagpapatawag or pagsomon ng Malacanang sa ambassador po ng China kahapon?
Alam
Thank
mo, kung ako yung ambassador ng China, I don't want to look at it from Malacanang's point of view because I don't really know what they're trying to do. But I would like to see it from the point of view of the ambassador. If you call the ambassador of China to Malacanang, that means there is something substantial, there is something important, there is something comprehensive that you want to discuss. Because the ambassador will not know what it's all about and what you're going to say, right? So pupunta siya doon. Ngayon, pagkatapos nitong usapan na to, tanungin natin yung ambassador. Ano ba tingin mo? Kausap mo presidente? Ano tingin mo sa kanya? Ano sinabi sa'yo? Anong trato niya sa'yo? Kasi baka naman nagkukwentuhan lang sila kung anong sine na panood nila, di ba? Hindi natin alam eh. Hindi natin alam kung gaano kalalim ang pinag-usapan. Pero kailangan malaman natin, kayo sa media, kayo nagpapaalam sa buong sambayanan kung ano talaga nangyayari. Hindi ko pwedeng mag-speculate na ganito, ganyan. Hindi. Ang sinasabi ko lang, from the point of view of the ambassador, what kind of a president do we have?
Thank you. Thank you very much. May pasingit lang, may tanong dito tatlo on one issue na all the panelists could give sana short answers. What is your view daw of the Taiwan issue? Kasi sabi daw dito sa mga tanong ng mga journalists na sa Facebook and Zoom na during this EDCA, paulit-ulit daw sinasabi, Defense Secretary Austin kept mentioning the Taiwan issue. And some Philippine officials even said, if there's a war in Taiwan, will they allow these bases to be part of the war? Kasi is Mutual Defense Treaty, does this cover territories outside the Philippines and USA? What are your views on the Taiwan issue? And if there's war, what will happen to the Philippines? Short analysis by everyone. Dr. Chan muna and then the others. Your view on Taiwan issue.
Actually, this Taiwan issue is the most delicate issue. I want to remind people about history. If you think China is a rising power, do you think any rising power in the 5,000 years past will allow a country to be divided and split? So definitely, if I study history, no country will allow that, not only China. Particularly China has a long history about unity. They always associate national progress with unity. So this is my answer. China will not give up Taiwan. And number two, I will give you a very interesting point of view of the Taiwanese before and after the Pelosi visit. Before, it's very consistent. 60 to 70% of the Taiwanese believe on three things. First, China will not attack. Second, if China attack, America will come. Third, when America come, America will win. Now, I will tell you what is really happening in Nancy Pelosi visit. For the 3-4 days, the Chinese declare the exercise area is a de facto blockade of Taiwan. Singapore Airlines canceled the flight to Taipei, and no container ship in those 3-4 days docked in Taiwan because the port area somehow was closed. And then this is the largest military exercise in which China did it in a short time. They mobilized 500 military aircraft sorties, 50 more naval vessels in the exercise. So Taiwan, after this, today, 20% of Taiwanese did not believe these three things anymore, which is a huge drop. And I think it's being realistic, because if you look at the US war machine, I am following military strategies and studies on weaponry because of my engineering background. And I will tell you, China now is really a peer competitor. In all the 6-7 military exercise, non-public, that the US conduct on the Taiwan scenario, US lost all the 6-7 war games conducted by the US Defense Department. Now, in the last CSIS research, there's a very interesting finding. Even though it's politically incorrect to say today that China might win, but CSIS already said, if America wins, the cost will be very, very high. There will be how many? 2 aircraft carrier, 3 aircraft carrier lost, and all this stuff. And in American history, life is important. They just lost 30,000 men in Korean War, 55,000 men in Vietnam, and you look at them, what happened? They just run away. So I really feel that we have to be very careful. In an industrial revolution era, new weaponries are coming up. And in industrial revolution era, you have to be very careful about the incumbent being overtaken by the rising power. And we are living in 4th industrial revolution, as everybody knows.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Chan. Now, Senator Coseteng, for your short analysis. Then we have many other questions. Thank you.
I'm not afraid of China invading Taiwan, seriously. Because, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's now like more than 50 billion US dollars of investments the Taiwan businessmen have in China. The population of Taiwan is even smaller than a large city in China. Taiwan has what, 22, maybe 23 million people? And what is the population of cities like Shanghai or Beijing or Chengdu? You know, these are huge cities. So about 25, 30 million people. So Taiwan may be even as big as or smaller than the big cities of China. Number 3, they look alike, they talk alike, they eat the same food. They're across the straits. China is building a tunnel connecting China and Taiwan for faster movement of goods and people. I don't want to stir a hornet's nest. If at all there are some who are seeking independence, and then let them settle it themselves. Why? They understand the language. They don't need an interpreter. They don't need to double speak. You know, if you even look at the Museum of Taiwan, if they changed, these are all antiques and artifacts from mainland China that are now in Taiwan. If you even change the exhibits every day, I don't think you will see the same thing twice for 1 year. That's the treasures of China are also in Taiwan. I mean, let's face it, you know. So I don't believe the biggest trading partner of Taiwan is China. Can you imagine if things from China don't get into Taiwan anymore? This is we should broaden our minds and not fall for the propaganda of the side that just wants to sell more arms to Taiwan, sell more war material to Taiwan. So guguluhin mo, sabi mo, uy, i-invade din na kayo. Bili ka yun ng mas marami pang barko at eroplano sa amin, di ba? Sabi nga nung Taiwanese, teka muna, yung mga bagong eroplano ngayon, hindi na namin alam paano paliparin. You have to train those pilots to fly those planes in the first place. You know, this is getting a little ridiculous. So why are we going to be the pawns tayo yung pakakain nila sa kanyon. Tayo yung cannon fodder. Di ba? So bakit tayo papayag?
Thank you. Yes. Yes, there's a question for Miss Diane Sayer. Yes, there's a question at the back. Somebody raising her hand. Wala na. Yes. Yes. There's a question for Miss Diane Sayer. Somebody message here. What are the American politicians doing in the peace effort? Or is it true the U.S., the Republicans and Democrats are united in war in Ukraine, or are the anti-war politicians also increasing? Can Miss Diane Sayer answer? Is she there? No. Another question, Miss Barbara Meda-Kanay here. Yeah, somebody at the back. Please state your name lang.
Yes,
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Nikki Coseteng and the rest of the panelists. I'm Jopel Peleño from DWIZ. One of the congressmen has released this latest statement na in-urge niya or hinihimok niya si President Marcos Jr. na pumasok sa mas marami pang VFA agreements, mukhang 5 countries. So dahil ito dito po sa recent incidents sa West Philippine Sea. So any reactions lang po regarding this move ng isang mambabatas?
Yes. Pwedeng short reactions from everyone.
Okay. So the question is, anong reaction sa pagpapadami ng mga proposal
More
for
DFA.
more VFA arrangements with the countries like Japan,
Australia,
maybe Australia, New Zealand, and so on.
etc.
Number one, tanong kay Bongbong Marcos, kailangan ba? Anong nakikita niyang pangailangan? Laser? At mag-VFA siya at magdadala ng libo-libong mga military from iba't ibang country sa Pilipinas sa laser allegations lang. Bongbong Marcos needs a lot of diversionary issues, from his failure sa agriculture, his failure sa diplomacy. Marami siyang failures. So I interpret this as diversionary measures. No? Kung sinasabi niya wala namang third party ang target, bakit mo nga ipropose ang DFA kung wala ka namang third party na enemy ng Pilipinas? Bakit hindi niya sabihin China? Kasi hindi po pwede. Kasi sinabi na ng National Security Advisor ni President Duterte na si Hermogenes Esperon, retired Army General, na China is not an enemy. Specific po yan sinabi ni Esperon. Wala namang sinasabing bago that China is an enemy. So Bongbong Marcos, wag mo na goyohin ang bayan. Umaming ka na inkompetente ka.
Tony, may tanong pa dito connected to your answer.
Yeah.
May nagsabi dito, dalawa nagtanong. Ito pang mga EDCA and BFA na non-stop na ina-announce, makakasira pa sa image ng Pilipinas as a tourism and investment destination in Asia. Hindi kaya matatakot ang mga negosyante na puro na lang gera, puro na lang sundalo ang inaakit natin dito. Bakit? May nagtanong dito, dalawa. Bakit daw parati pag Amerika kausap daw saka Japan, puro defense, puro military ang pinag-uusapan? Bakit hindi daw katulad ng Thailand, Indonesia, pinag-uusapan pabrika, resort, turista? Hindi ba nakakasira sa imahe ng Pilipinas? Your short reactions to the three panelists. Kasi daw puro BFA daw nasa headline. Lahat na ng opisyal nagsasalita. Pagkausap ang Amerika, puro military, puro military. Hindi pa pwede turista daw at saka investment ang pag-usapan kasi nasisira daw image ng Pilipinas. What are your reactions? Nasisira daw image ng Pilipinas. Na puro na ng gera ang gusto ng mga ibang bansa dito sa atin. Nakakatakot daw.
Every tourist want to go to a peaceful countries. Every business always want to invest in a place that is stable. I think that is common sense. And then definitely what President Marcos will do, I don't think anybody can stop him given his executive prerogative But are you sure that China will not react? I do not know. But just out of common sense also, they most likely might react. Now, if you look at Australia and Japan, I don't think Australia is very interested. Maybe former Prime Minister Morrison, yes, but definitely Prime Minister Albanese is not too keen on that. Okay, he's going to visit China himself. Now, I will put it this way. You have to look at the long-term trajectory. If you believe in the long-term trajectory of China, let us have a way to live, coexist with them. The Mexican has a very interesting statement. Is that, oh my God, the poor Mexico, we are living so close to America and so far from Lord. Okay, so these are things that on a historical perspective, when you look at national interest, it is not a 6-year event. You have to define it for the long term. And I'm sure President Marcos realized it, because if you look at his statement, I think that he always tried to steer to the middle, because he has proclaimed that RP-China relationship is not just on South China Sea, it's multidimensional. I think that is a very fair statement. And he has ruled out Subic and Clark as the basis. Okay, so I feel that from ASEAN's point of view, from my vintage point about on Southeast Asian studies, we are very about militarizations of South China Sea. That is why Indonesia has been very steadfast this year, pushing for code of conduct, even though he knows that the situation now is more complicated. Now, another thing I want to mention is that, do you know that everybody recognize Vietnam is the most successful countries in attracting tourism, in attracting investment. And you look at the Vietnam foreign policy, you know how to navigate the treacherous water of squeezing between powers. Vietnam has done it very well. And I want to remind you, the original 9 dash line was actually 11 dash line. The 2 dash line disappeared because China settled the border dispute with Vietnam.
Reaction from Senator Nikki Coseteng.
Yeah, tourism.
Matatakot ba tourist and investor? Puro na lang BFA, EDCA pinag-uusapan daw. Ano sa tingin niyo?
Yeah, tourism is an important revenue generator, whether local or international, from local or international tourists. And somehow we have not been able to cross significantly that 6 or 7 million tourists per annum. And a lot of those numbers are really our balikbayans, are people who come back to the Philippines who are deployed abroad. No? So it is very difficult to sell the Philippines for some reason or other. And one of them is indeed this issue of quote unquote security. We could be secure. Just leave us alone. Pabayaan nyo kami. Ba? We can take care of ourselves. Isipin nyo na lang. Money generated between Hong Kong and China, that already represents 30%, almost 30% of our exports. China is our biggest buyer. Sinasabi lang nila na hindi China, sinasabi lang nila Amerika. Bakit? Kasi hiniwalay nila yung China tsaka Hong Kong. Kaya kung pagsasamahin mo yung China tsaka Hong Kong, it is bigger than our export to the United States and bigger than our export to Japan. Ngayon, look at Australia. When Australia insisted that the coronavirus was started in Wuhan, and they insisting because tinutulak sila, inuudyok sila ng Amerika. Nasabihin nyo, echo our line that the virus is a Chinese virus. Australia did that. So China doesn't even have to do anything. He just has to say, okay, let's not buy Australian wine. Let's not buy anything from Australia. Let's not buy the seafood from Australia. Whatever it is, wag na tayo bumili sa kanila. China will not bomb Australia just for saying that. They will just say, wag na tayo bumili ng whatever, saging sa Pilipinas. Wag na tayo bumili ng kung ano-ano man sa Pilipinas, di ba? Sino ngayon ang lugi? Hindi naman tayo bobombahin ng China or sasakupin ng China. I'm not sure if China is interested in taking over 115 million people like us. They want to sell to us. Hindi ba? I don't know if even the Americans want us.
They didn't want us before. We wanted to be a state daw, di ba noon? Oo.
Baka nagkakamal. Gusto lang nila kunin ang ating mineral resources, kunin yung ating pagkain, kunin yung ating asukal, kunin yung
Saka basis for $80 million.
at saka yung parang barya lang na binabayad nila para tayo maging staging area.
Pero
Thank you very much.
yes.
May tanong pa?
Yes,
Yes.
ano po ba yung
Thank you
dapat
very
na
much.
gawin ng Philippine government para matigil po itong harassment, pambubuli sa West Philippine Sea?
Anong gagawin na dapat gawin ng Pilipinas?
Yes.
Wala actually, wala namang pambubuli.
So haya,
Wala namang pambubuli. Yan po ay propaganda ng mga American boys na nagtutulak ng away po rito. Every year, 10 taon ko na kasi sinusubaybayan ito at sinasagot. May season po yan, lalo na Marso, tataas ang anti-China propaganda, bababa, tataas ulit mga end of April. Paulit-ulit lang yan, paulit-ulit lang yan. Although humuhupa na po yung reaksyon ng taong bayan dyan na, andyan na naman yan. Kasi sa survey, ito pinipili kong survey na ito galing sa labas talaga, Central European University, Palaki University, para hindi Pilipino, hindi Amerikano. 52 to 55% of Filipinos already look at China very positively or positively. Lumamang na po, ano? So, yan po ang project ng Amerikano. Talagang diin ng negatibo lang. Ganyan lang po, no?
yes sir.
But let me just habol ko lang data. In 2019, ang Chinese tourists dito, 1.8 million na dumating, spent 2.5 billion US dollars or 120 billion pesos. Ano? Isang sektor lang po 'yon. Ikumpara mo sa isang mabibili mong 200 pisong laser light. Ano bang mas importante?
May tanong na follow up sa tanong niya. Bakit daw non-stop itong propaganda na masama ang China? Araw-araw, every week, may lumalabas na news para pang pasira ng relationship ng dalawang bansa.
Pero
Hindi
yung mga
to-
activity,
bakit non-stop? Bakit Vietnam wala? Bakit Malaysia wala? Mas marami sinasakop na isla daw ang Vietnam. May nagtanong dito, mas marami sinakop na isla ang Vietnam, inalis pa sundalo ng Pilipinas. Bakit not a single complaint daw against Vietnam and Malaysia and Indonesia? Bakit always China ang hina-highlight kahit na alanganin ng news? Tapos, bakit daw non-stop ito? Is there, para makalibre ba sila sa pase or ano? Ano yun? Parang, bakit Vietnam wala daw?
I just have
Sabi.
something to answer, no? Bakit Malaysia at Vietnam or Indonesia hindi nagugulo ng katulad ng
Pati Vietnam.
ginugulo pati tayo.
Pati Vietnam.
Tayo lang ginugulo, di ba? Ganyan. Bakit? Una-una, hindi papayag yung mga bansa na yon na magtayo ng American bases doon.
At Vietnam, tatlong no. Walang
Hindi.
sila pakialam.
Hindi sila
Walang,
papayag.
walang epekto.
Hindi sila papayag. So, hindi sila binubuyo. Hindi sila tinatakot. Tayo, nakikita ng kano, huy, madaling mauto yung mga Pilipino. Buyuin mo lang. No? Di ba? Madaling matiklo yung Pilipino. Kaya, alam mo yung kano,
Halos every week.
matalino
may
din yan.
news.
Marunong din yan. Hindi naman sila marunong, di ba? Ngayon, ang sasabihin ko lang, yung South China Sea na yan, meron tayong contentious issues dyan. Na meron silang claim, meron tayong claim, at iba pang mga bansa, hindi lamang tayo. No? Ang gusto natin, yung South China Sea ay maging free for all to traverse this corridor. No? 80% or 70 or almost 80% of the tonnage of the world passes through the South China Sea. Di ba? Ngayon, kung may maaapektuhan dyan, ang pinakamatinding maapektuhan, yung China. Sila dapat maging aware, maging cautious, di ba? Pero anong ginawa nila? 2017 pa lang. 2017, gumawa sila ng trend. Magmula Iwu hanggang London. Tren. 3 weeks. Nandun ka na. Yung Iwu, nandun lahat yung mga pabrika. Pabrika ng kahit anong gusto mo, nandun sa Iwu. Lahat ng tinitinda rito na made in China, galing sa Iwu. Di ba? Alam nyo yan. Yung tren na yan, magdadala ng container ng mga gamit papuntang London at that's 12,000 kilometers. 12,000 kilometers in 3 weeks. Dadaan yan dito sa Afghanistan, dadaan ng Pakistan, kung saan-saan dadaan yan. At yung 12,800 kilometers na tren ay pupunta sa Madrid to Europe. So China to Europe may tren. Hindi na nila kailangan dumaan sa South China Sea. Magaling sila mag-isip eh. Gaano kahirap paandarin ng isang barko? Ilang tao kailangan mo sa isang barko? Iikot ka ng South China Sea, Straits of Malacca, pupunta ka ng Suez Canal, kung saan hulihin ka pa ng pirata sa Somalia, kung ano-ano pang problema mo, di ba? Eto, diretso. Iwu to London. 12,000 kilometers in 3 weeks. China trade does not stop. Kung dito sa South China Sea ang issue.
Very good analysis. Thank you very much, Senator. May one of the last 2 questions kasi we are almost lunchtime na. It's 12 o'clock. Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 more short questions, short answers kasi 12 o'clock already. Miss Barbara Maydakanay from Gulf News, veteran journalist.
My question is, we used to have love-hate relationship with the US, no?
Yes.
Right now, can you say it's love-hate or love-love or hate-hate? And
Or it's complicated. Joke lang.
the other question is, with China, based on data,
Yes.
do we have that love-hate relationship or how is it? I mean,
Yes.
this one.
Pwedeng short answers kasi 12 o'clock already para 1 or 2 more questions. Short answers from everyone. Very short, please.
Anong question ulit?
Mayroon daw, do we have a love-hate relationship with the US before? Now, what is it? And China, she's asking, in the past, we used to have a love-hate relationship with the US. Is it now love-hate? How do you classify it now
With the US?
under Marcos and Biden?
With the US?
Yes, and then what about China and Philippines?
Ito ang totoo.
Short answer, please. Short.
Ito ang totoo statistic para hindi bias, no?
Yes, short answer.
Pulse Asia made a survey around 2-3 months ago.
Yes.
At ang concerns out of 16 categories, ang concerns sa external security, 3% ng populasyon po natin.
Yes.
Ang top 5 issues lahat, internal economy. Yun ang inaalala po ng taong bayan sa bayan natin. Hindi China, hindi US. Ano? So please keep that in mind.
Thank you.
So
Sabi ni
if it's the
Senator,
economy, it's important to remember that it's China that is helping the Philippine economy. There's a question kasi here from the live stream
yes.
na next time let's have envoys to join the debate. Ang sagot sa kanya, doon kayo makinig sa seminar nila.
Yes.
But
yes,
you will
yes.
find out kung kayo ay makikinig sa seminar ng Stratbase at saka Albert Del Rosario Institute, it is a closed session lagi. They do not allow the public to listen in,
No debate.
nor debate, nor ask questions.
Yes.
Ganyan po ang kanilang character.
Thank you. Short answer from the 2 other panelists. Please short kasi maybe 1 or 2 more questions. It's
This is a very good question.
Yes.
Actually, the way I look at it is that if you talk about the United States, I think there's no doubt Filipinos love United States. But whether United States love the Philippines, my answer is I do not know. And my answer is probably they don't care. Okay.
Yes.
Now, in the case of China, I will put it this way. Definitely, the Filipinos look at China as a giant neighbor. And every time you have a giant neighbor, it's a love and hate mixed feelings. Just like what the South Americans, Central Americans, and Mexicans feel about America. They always hate America, but they always run to America. Now, in the case of China to the Philippines, my thinking is that they understand one thing. Actually, the key player in South China Sea and in Southeast Asia is Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, and Vietnam to some extent. Now, Philippines, they always feel that it is on the peripheral. So they are willing to help because they know Southeast Asia is the immediate neighbors. Okay? So China to the Philippines is that they probably don't care too much, but they are willing to help in some way. Okay? Now, Filipinos to China is that it depends on the swing. Because I've already mentioned, Philippines is one of the few countries, just like the Senator Coseteng has said, we have a 6-year shift of foreign policy. This is very unusual on the nations around the world.
Wild swings.
Yes, and that swing is very wide. President Duterte make headlines in 2016. President Pinoy make headlines in 2013, I think, when he filed the claim. And of course, President Marcos again make headline this year when you talk about this visiting forces agreement, blah, blah, blah. So I really feel that whether love and hate affair is not important. The important is that we as a country identify our national priorities, identify our national objective. Now you must remember, you cannot blame other countries from emphasizing you or overlooking you. They have their own national interest to look after. Thank you.
Thank you. Short answer from Senator. So we have maybe 1 or 2 questions pa. 12 o'clock already.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think we should also be conscious that there is a difference between national interest and vested interest. We cannot expound on this too much because we are short of time, but that has to be very clear. May diferensya, malaking diferensya ng national interest at vested interest. Nasaan ba tayo? Alam ba natin ang diferensya? Pangalawa po, sinabi ng Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. na we should be a friend to all and an enemy to none. Yung bang sinabi niya, sinulat ng speechwriter niya? O yung bang sinabi niya ay galing sa puso niya? Dahil kung sinulat lang ng speechwriter niya at magaling siya bumasa, okay, narinig natin lahat. Paano ngayon lalagyan ng laman itong sinabi niya na to be a friend to all and an enemy to none? Hindi pa niya dinagdagan because the interest of the Filipino people comes first. Hindi naman niya sinabi yun eh. Pero doon na lang tayo doon sa dalawang pangungusap. Friend to all, enemy to none. Now, let me see. Ano bang kilos mo para ipakita ito? Tama ba yung sibuyas? 700 pesos? Ito, bumibili ng sibuyas per kilo, di ba? Oh, tama ba na ganito nangyayari sa ating agrikultura? So, gusto ko makita yon eh. Friend to all, enemy to none.
Thank you.
Pakitan natin. Ito bang ginagawa ninyo na magtayo ng 4 o 5, may nagsasabi pa 9 na base dito ng Amerikano sa Pilipinas? Yan ba ang friend to all, enemy to none?
Thank you very much. We have time for one last question kasi it's past 12 o'clock. Kung wala, there's a last question here. What is your appeal or unsolicited advice to President Bongbong Marcos with Taiwan, with EDCA, and Ukraine? Next week is the anniversary of the war in Europe, which has destabilized the whole world. Messages from the 3 of you. Appeal or message, short lang please, to President Bongbong Marcos for the sake of Philippines and Asia, please. Appeal or request or advice?
I will no longer appeal to the political leaders of the country, of
Yes.
this country. I will appeal only to the people. Gumalaw na po tayo. It's been too long. Umasa na tayo paulit-ulit sa mga hinahalal natin. Pag nahalal, baliktad naman ang ginagawa. Taong bayan na lang ang magdesisyon sa mga darating na panahon.
Yes. Unsolicited advice or appeal to President Marcos on our foreign policy of the Philippines. Any suggestion?
I think I can only say this thing. Every country, and I'm sure every president, has the interest of the people at heart. Get all the informations and decide for yourself. Now, it's very rare for a small countries taking a stand in the big power rivalry. This could be very dangerous.
Any advice or appeal to President Marcos on foreign policy? Short advice or appeal?
I think the president should read more and learn more. You cannot make logical, intelligent decisions if there's nothing, no facts, no figures between your brains, between your ears. Another point is that when you make decisions, please, It's the good of the country. It's for the next generation. Remember that not all of us have an escape hatch like you do. We do not have billions of dollars stashed away somewhere. We do not have houses in other parts of the world that can be a safe haven for all of us. So please read, learn, go back and find out what happened in history, because if you don't know it, or you don't want to know about it, then you're just bound to make the same mistakes or commit the same mistakes. So remember, we 115 million Filipinos are stuck here. You have the freedom to fly anytime you want. You can have all the jets. You can buy all the houses, the palaces, the mansions that you want. And all the spending money that you could not even finish in how many 100 lifetimes. Please, don't make us look like fools, and maawa naman kayo sa Pilipino. Kayo walang problema eh. Marami kayong bahay sa ibang bansa. Pera. Madali kayo lumipad. Ginawa nyo na yan eh. Lumipad na kayo eh. O, di ba? So, yun lang ang aking masasabi. Kawawa naman po kami. At hindi lang mahihirap ang kawawa. Yung middle class na paunti-unti nawawala. Yung kanilang pinag-ipunan dahil lang naniniwala sila dito sa mga propaganda, sa mga trolls, sa mga TikTok, sa mga... Hindi po yan ang kailangan namin eh. Kasi binabaliwala ninyo yung suliranin ng taong bayan. Binabaliwala nyo, hindi nyo pinapansin. Yung may reklamo, wala lang, baliwala lang lahat yan. Kasi sayawan lang, party lang, sige, biyahe lang tayo, okay. Okay lang sana kung maunlad yung bansa natin. Ngayon, meron pang Maharlika Fund. Di ba? Nakita natin sa Sweden, sa ibang bansa, na lusaw lahat yung pondo. Ang daming mga pera ng GSIS, SSS, o kung ano pa mang government institutions na ilalagay nyo dyan. Hindi yan sarili nyong alkansya. Kaya mag-ingat po kayo. Dahil hindi lang tatahimik ang Pilipino. Alam natin yan. Naghihintay lang ng oras yan. At kung hindi nyo alam kung anong gagawin ninyo, mabuti ngayon pa lang magkaalaman na. Yun po.
Thank you. We have time for closing statement. Thank you very much, Senator Coseteng. Short closing statement to summarize your views about the appeal to end war, EDCA, and to prevent the Ukraine situation in the Philippines. Short closing statement. We start with Senator and with Mr. Herman Laurel. Senator, short closing statement to summarize all your views.
Ako po'y nagpapasalamat na merong ganitong Kamuning Bakery Cafe forum. Dahil dito po, liliwanagan ang ibang mga issue at magsasalita rito po ay sa katotohanan lang at doon sa talagang sinasaloob at sinasapuso yung mga binabanggit ng mga opinyon. Wag niyo pong mamasamain sinasabi namin ang aming sinasabi. Dahil lahat ng gusto magsalita, wala pong ganitong klaseng oportunidad, wala pong ganitong klaseng forum. Sana po ang kapayapaan ay mangibabaw dito sa ating bansa. Dahil wala na po tayong hinahawakan eh. Wala na tayong pinanghahawakan kung hindi lamang na yung bansa natin na maging maunlad at maging makatarungan at tigilan na po natin yung pagkikiling dun sa mga gumagawa ng gulo at dun sa magdadala sa atin sa gulo. No? Let's stop it. Stop these games. Wala tayong kikitain dyan. Kung may kumita man, baka ibang kontratista kikita. O, di ba? O yung mga ibang stockholder, bibili ng stocks dun sa mga kumpanya na gumagawa ng mga tangke at gumagawa ng mga fighter jets, mga barko. Sila lang ang kikita dyan. Lahat tayo talo pagka nagkagulo dito. No? Kaya mahal natin yung ating bansa, pero hindi natin masasabi na yung mga desisyon ng liderato ay dahil mahal nila yung ating bansa. Yun po ang ating malaking problema. Kaya pasalamat po ako sa lahat sa inyo sa media dahil sa pamamagitan ninyo, doon aabot yung mga ganitong pananaw sa taong bayan. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Senator Nikki Coseteng. Dr. Henry Chan, your closing statement summarizing your views about EDCA, about possible war, Taiwan issue, and Philippine safety.
First, I must say that I'm nobody to provide any advice. I'm not so good on that. But I do hope that we are living in an age of transitions. We are living in an age of industrial revolutions. And the power equation, everybody can see, is changing very fast. So how to make the correct foreign policy decision, I think is a challenge facing the president. And I'm sure that every Filipino wish him well. Whether you like it or not, his success is everyone's success, and his failure is going to be everyone's failure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry Chan. Last but not the least, Mr. Herman Laurel, for your short closing statement.
Talagang ini-emphasize na ng short, no?
Sorry, ha?
Hindi, short naman talaga.
Oo.
Kasi marami akong short sa mga darating na linggo na media forum natin. This will be regular at least while I'm able to raise funds for it, every week or every 2 weeks, because we have to fight back sa information war. So maasahan po niyan. Maasahan niyo na pag-uusapan namin ni Ricky Lee, ni Nikki Coseteng, sa Kuko ng Agila Part 2. We'll talk about it maybe mga 6 months from now. We might have a movie.
Thank you to the journalist who suggested it. I-acknowledge ka doon.
Maasahan po ninyo sa next forum po natin, I will raffle off to all the online participants and on live participants 3 books of Victor Corpus, Deep
Ay, wow.
Points, no? The I forget the full name, but
Yes.
importante
Thank you.
kasi we need increase our knowledge of what the situation is. So that is a commitment. Every time we have a media forum, we will have raffles of books that are important to distribute to our public. So this is not going to be my short last. This is my short continuing ending messages.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Herman Laurel. Once again, we'd like to thank Miss Diane Sayer from New York, and of course, former Senator Nikki Coseteng for her views, and also Professor Ana Malindoy, who is studying for her PhD abroad, and from Singapore, Dr. Henry Chan, coming here again at Pandesal Forum. And most especially, thank you to our media friends and all those listening via Zoom and Facebook Live. We will upload this on in YouTube also. Thank you for coming to 84-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe.
May
last
tinatanong si
pahabol.
ma'am kasi hindi ko
Yes.
masagot.
Yes.
Yun po bang sa Kuko ng Agila Part 2, ang gaganap ba yung original na Erap ang Nikki Coseteng o yung anak na?
Maganda to. Baka yung kwento magiging, yung mga iba yun sa, di ba, Godfather 1 and 2, yun tatay nandun at yung anak na ang bida. O pwede, kunyari doon sa script, pwede.
Ayaw ni Senator.
Di ba, may anak or pamangkin na ang bibida doon. Tapos yung nanay nandun, pinikwento nangyari
Hindi,
noon.
dapat yung sa susunod na Kuko ng Agila, wag na natin iti-trivialize, di ba? Dapat
Naka-cutics.
talagang
Yes, serious.
yung tunay na mga nangyayari dahil ang sitwasyon natin ngayon ay mas seryoso kesa yung sitwasyon natin noon. No? Dahil noon, nung panahon na yon, meron 12 senador, nandyan na.
Yes.
Ngayon, wala na yung 12 senador. So our situation now is more perilous, is more dangerous, is more critical, more disturbing than it was when we did the movie. Sorry? Well, to some extent, yes, but we have to discuss it.
Very
no?
good.
We'll have to discuss
Hindi.
it because it's not just people don't like documentaries anymore. They find it too long.
Pwedeng
there's
part docu, part feature film.
whatever.
Sir Wilson,
Yes.
Ma'am Senator, dapat kasing nasa Senado, Coseteng at Laurel, hindi yung sino.
Ay, galing. Wow, in-endorse kayo, ha? In-endorse kayo. Why not?
Kailangan 12, di ba? O 13.
Alam mo, Senator, you are teenager compared to other Asian legislators. Oh, si Mahathir, 90 plus. Nag-election pa eh. Thank you. Thank you very much to our media friends. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ay, by the way pala, ibang marites ko sa inyo, next Tuesday dito, isang Spanish legislator coming here from the European Parliament. Darating dito, pero may translator siya. Batang activist. Anti-war and peace advocate.
in our college.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ay, I'm surprised na cover kayo. Journalista pala siya nung panahon ni Cory Aquino, Philip ako. Kayong dalawa hindi nagbabago. Si Senator tsaka ikaw, anong kinakain nyo, anong iniinom nyo? Di kayo Grabe. Eh, hindi pa pinanganak ibang dito, taga sila Clarissa and James. Bilib ako. Thank you, thank you. Thank you very much. At saka, by the way, si Senator Coseteng, kasama niya yung magagaling na mga nationalist senators sa Longga, Tanyada, Ople, pati si Bang Lapos na Ampoy, nagboto siya against the bases. And all them. Thank you, thank you. Ay, photo op, sorry. Sorry, magagalit ang panadero. Kung walang picture pala, sorry. Mr. Laurel, Dr. Chan, sorry. Picture tayo with the pandesal, I forgot. Alam mo, it doesn't matter whether you are Bongbong Marcos or Lenny or artista. We also have to have photo op with the pandesal here ng Kamuning Bakery. Whether US, China, or Russia ambassador. Yes, yes.